welcome our third speaker, Jianhuan. Jianhuan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for participating and having me here. This is a joint work with Shang-Jin, Inger, and Xiaobo. So the subsidies to intellectual property rights are very common around the world. However, since the quality of the IPR is not easy to verify by the bureaucrats, so when the government subsidizes firms, they may mainly rely on the counts of the IPRs. This type of the policy may incentivize firms to focus on the number of IPRs rather than the quality of IPRs. So you may naturally think that how likely are these very low value IPRs generated inspired by such policies, and what is going to be the welfare consequence. Moreover, when you consider about the number of the IPRs, actually firms can purchase outside, and this type of the trade of the IPRs may generate some additional channel of this misallocation. As what we want to do in this paper is to use China, a very large this type of the policy called InnoCom program to quantify the welfare of such type of the subsidy policies. Okay, you will ask me, China have lots of the subsidy programs. Why do we focus on the InnoCom? The reason is that InnoCom program is the largest subsidy programs in China. So on this figure, we list the budgets of different types of the pro-innovation programs in China. So you can see that InnoCom, in terms of budget, is just dominate all other programs. Well, let me give you some kind of institutional background of the InnoCom program. This program was established in 2008, and if it can successfully be subsidized, the firms can enjoy a big cut of the corporate tax income from 33% to 15%, and this benefit can sustain for 3 years. There are some kind of pre-requirements for you to qualify to be subsidized. The firms need to belong to some 8 high-tech industries. You can imagine special equipment, precision instrument, and blah, blah, this type of industries. And on top of that, these firms should be high R&D intensity firms. After you qualify these kind of pre-requirements, then you apply, and the government is going to evaluate you from 4 categories. These 4 categories is actually they just give you some points. Summing all these points together is going to be 100. And if the firms can be above 70 points, then the firm can be subsidized. These 4 categories are the counts of the IPRs, which is 30 points. This category is 30 points. The ability to manage R&D, 30 points. The ability to commercialize the technology, 20 points. And the firm's growth potential, 20 points. So what we focus is going to be the first category, the counts of the IPR, which is about 30 points maximum. Okay, this is going to be the details of how the government evaluates your counts of IPRs. Basically, you can see that there are 5 letter grades, A, B, C, D, E. They just grade like teachers. If the firm has 6 or more IPRs, your letter grade is A. By the way, actually, if you have some firm may have one invention. The invention actually is going to be the most high value patents in Chinese classification system. So if you have one invention, this is equivalent to you have 6 IPRs. The IPRs mainly are patents and softwares. So you can see that if you have 5 patents, you have 5 IPRs, you get letter B and blah, blah. When the government evaluates you, they do not distinguish whether the IPR is self-developed in-house or purchased external. They just count them. There are some kind of variation within each grade. For instance, when you get letter A, your points could vary from 24 points to 30 points. The average standard deviation of the points within a letter grade is about 2.5. So let me give you some kind of motivation facts. The first motivation facts will be plot is the IPR distributions. In 2008, the year this program started, against 2007, 1 year before this program initiated. So interesting is that you can see lots of firms start to hold just 6 IPRs. Remember that if you hold beyond 6 IPRs, your letter grade will not be increased. So it's just like they just hold 6 IPRs and cross fingers they can be subsidized. However, the distribution in 2007 is quite different. You do not see any notch points around the 6 IPRs. Seems suggest that these InnoCom policies incentivize firms to adjust their IPRs to be subsidized. You may wonder that when the bureaucrats grade you, give you points, do they consider the quality of the IPRs or not? So we are trying to verify that. So in this regression, the left-hand side is going to be the point you get on that IPR category. In every column, we control for the letter grade of the IPR, essentially the number of IPRs, and other firm characteristics such as industry and ownership. In the first column, you can see that big firms basically get higher points. However, the bureaucrat seems to not distinguish whether the IPR is in-house or purchased external. There is no significant difference between across the points. In the second to the fourth columns, we use different measures of the quality of patents to verify whether there is relationship between the points and IPR points and the objective IPR qualities. The second column we use the citations, patent citations. In the third point we use the number of inventions, and in the fourth column we use the renewal rate. You can see that on average, it's not, most of the measures are not significantly correlated with how much points you can get, except for the number of inventions. Even in the number of inventions, the magnitude is quite small. This 0.02 means that if you have one more invention, the point you can get, the marginal point you can get, is only 0.02 points. Remember that, considering about this kind of the grading scheme, from letter C to B, you increase 1 IPR, your points could increase about 6 points. The magnitude is very, very small when we talk about the quality of the IPRs. Bureaucrats mainly focus on the counts.
Can I ask a clarification question? What is the difference between patents and inventions here?
In China, the patents have 3 types: invention, design, and
Okay, good. Thank you.
Jianhuan, so is there any story for the correlation between sales and these points?
So when you, first of all, our story, when we use our model to quantify the welfare loss, we do use this kind of the firm size information. However, just looking at the grading scheme, it seems that it's at least it is to say the big firms are going to be more likely to be subsidized. Actually, when you look at the firms who can be subsidized, there are a significant amount of the firms who are very small firms.
So the policy doesn't necessarily imply, the points are depending on sales, but if you look at the data, you do find such correlation.
Yes.
So somehow, there is some hidden kind of favoritism given to large firms. Is that the right way to think about the correlation?
No, actually, our main message here is trying to argue firms change their innovation. The firms change their innovation behavior rather than focus on the resources allocation across firm size. This channel in our model we have that, but quantitatively seems not so important.
Okay, I don't quite understand it, but we can discuss that later.
Yes,
I'm thinking about an alternative channel because on your previous slide you show that there are several categories through which a firm can get the tax rebate. Maybe scoring high on IPR is more difficult than hiring R&D staff or doing, I don't know, S&T commercialization. So maybe bigger firms have more abilities and resources to score high on IPR rather than doing other things.
Why the big firms do not have? I think the big firms also can have higher ability to manage R&D and commercialize science and technology.
Because like relatively speaking, right? Like if I'm an SME, I can always. I remember this paper by Daniel Xu and others. It's easy to relabel some of my staff as R&D and say, I manage them well, and I don't have money to do really research and innovation that can get me a patent at the end. So I'm saying like big firms have obviously absolute advantages on all of them, but relatively speaking, there may be constraints on small firms to score high on IPR compared to other categories.
So let me answer it this way. So first of all, when you look at these 4 categories, the other 3, 2 to 4, actually are quite subjective. If you read their how do they grade the firms, it seems that they mainly rely on evaluation of some experts in these industries. However, the most objective category is the first one. They actually have very details, on counts equals to some points. So and the first motivation factor that I just show you seems to verify that firms do respond to this kind of the policy. On top of that, yeah, maybe some firms can make trade-off between different categories. But when we quantify our this kind of welfare policy, we have some kind of random noise in the sense that even you get good performance in the first category, you may still have some possibility that you fail to be subsidized. So to some extent, we capture this kind of the consideration. Finally, the first category, we have lots of the data, so that is why we focus on the IPR concept.
Yeah, but I think it's worth thinking more, right? Because think from a firm's perspective, they really have to strategize about how to score high and manage their resources across these 4 categories.
It is possible that bureaucrats infer quality of the patents based on firm size, but this regression table shows that these are very bad guesses. That the more objective measure of firm of IPR quality based on exposed data on firm renewal behavior or patent citation are not captured by bureaucratic review process. Later on, Jianhuan will talk about firms acquiring IPRs, including either producing their own low quality IPR or buying from other firms. It could be part of the analysis. Right. So maybe this larger firm may have a natural advantage in being able to afford more external IPRs.
So
it seems that
any other questions? Okay.
It seems that may I?
Please.
Okay. It seems that you're moving towards the Goodhart's law, in the sense that the instrument that they pick up, turn out to be not going to indicate the ability to innovate anymore, because of the way you do the IPR count, connected with the qualities and so on. So when you have, when the administrators administer the subsidies or tax cuts based on that instrument become not useful anymore. Is that what you're trying to get at?
No. So
in a way, yes.
Yeah,
in a way.
Yeah.
So that the thing that like some of us are older, like me, when I think about like counting papers, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? It turned out that it may not be a bad thing for the very young people before they can get into AERs and so on, just to make sure that they have some experience and so on and so forth. It's not a bad idea. So the quality of the papers at the very beginning is not high. There's not a lot of citations, but what matters is the dynamic over time. What happens?
Good point. I need to think about that.
No, but Jianhuan is going to explicitly estimate.
Yeah.
What are the kind of the additional IPRs that have been generated as a result of the program? Is a way to assign quality and resource cost, estimate to those. So he's going to report the efficiency loss associated with this. And also to Harvey's early question about comparison was a Daniel and Kuof's paper, Jianhuan will also give an explicit comparison about how so this paper and that paper look at the same program essentially, but from different angles, and in what ways that Jianhuan will report essentially additional efficiency loss channels not covered by that paper.
So the third motivation fact I want to show you is that you may wonder, since the government seems to not value too much about the quality of the patents, what are going to change within the firm? So what we look at is the portfolio of the IPRs at the firm level. So in other words, here is going to be the counts of the IPR for each firm. Then for every for the y-axis, we plot the share of firms who have at least one invention. For instance, you can imagine that roughly here, it means if you have one IPR, then about over 80% of the firms have the invention, and the other basically have some other types of the patents. Interesting is that when the IPR counts approach to 6, you can see that more and more firms do not want to hold inventions. They hold some other type of the IPRs, software or non-type of patents. After you cross the point 6, then these curves go up again. Firms start to increase.
Jianhuan, so this change in share, is it due to the more new firms starting to holding IPRs, or for the old ones that they were very productive?
This is conditional on the firms who in the end be subsidized. So we are looking at roughly 200 firms.
Right, but some of these firms may not have, who may don't do any IPRs, and now they start to enter. And firms that who doing good IPRs, and are they also change the behavior, or is it just mainly draw the people who try to exploit the subsidy by starting to do IPRs? So that's a two separate question, right? Whether this point system will reduce actually innovations for those innovators. They were originally innovating, now they started to divert their effort to numbers rather than quality.
Yeah.
Or it could be, so the composition effects, is it a composition effect, or is actually less intensive effect?
This figure basically shows that they divert their effort to other type of the innovations. We are looking at.
But I don't see how you can see here. This is a share of firms, so I'm not seeing the same firm who's a.
Yeah, that's basically because this is a motivation fact. When we do the more formal regression analysis, we're going to control for firm this, and that is going to conduct the same.
Actually, clarification. I don't know how to read your graph. What's on the what is in the vertical axis?
The X line is going to be number of IPR counts. For instance,
in the firm.
Yeah, in the firm. That's right.
And then the vertical.
The vertical is going to be for those firms who have the same number of the IPR. Then how many firms have inventions?
I see.
How many firms have inventions? Okay. So this figure basically want to say that it seems that this InnoCom policy incentivizes firms to decrease high value items. Okay, great. So what do we do? What we do is that we use the detailed data from one of the largest cities in China to document that. Subsidy competing firms. What do we mean by subsidy competing firms? Those firms who satisfy the pre-requirements, they can apply to this program. So these type of firms, they generate low quality.
Sorry, I may interrupt you again. The previous slide, please. How many years of data do you have with firms?
In this figure, it's only 2008.
Only, sorry?
2008. But when we do our regression analysis, we're going to use more a relatively longer horizon.
So this is only 1 year?
Yes.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Jianhuan, could you please be a bit closer to microphone?
Oh, sure. Sorry. Okay, I can. So we also document that for those non-competing firms, which are those firms who are not qualified to apply for this program. They try to produce and sell low quality IPRs. In the end, we estimate an equilibrium model to quantify the welfare effect of this policy. Overall, we find that the welfare loss is about 700 million RMB per year, which is about 3% of the industrial aggregate profit. And the welfare loss comes from 3 channels. First of all, it's going to be these subsidy competing firms generate low quality IPRs to be subsidized. Second, there is some kind of reallocation effect. The IPRs trade to some firms who cannot use it in the most efficient way. And the last effect is going to be these non-competing firms who are not qualified to apply for this program, but they also want to generate more low quality IPRs to sell. And when we decompose these 3 channels, we find the last channel is the most important one. Allowing or not allowing the trade of the patent actually can double the welfare loss. Okay, the paper is related to 2 types of the literature. First is the misallocation of the innovation resources, where Xie and Zhang document that the subsidies in China mainly go to public firms. However, the patents are mainly generated by private firms. Maybe the closest paper to ours is Chen, Liu, Serrato, and Xu. What they also looking at exactly same program, the InnoCom program, and they highlighted that the welfare loss mainly comes from re-leveling R&D. Our paper argued that the welfare loss comes from you waste resources to generate low quality IPRs. So kind of similar flavor, but Importantly, we show that the efficiency loss is more than doubled if you're considering the trade of the patents. The second type of the literature is the tax incentives for innovations. Around the world, there are several ways to subsidize innovations. Most of the countries, focus on the R&D expenditures. They give you some kind of tax cut. You spend more on the R&D. A few countries, especially in the Europe, they have the so-called patent box policy, which is going to give the firm a tax cut for those revenues generated by patents. This has some similar flavor to the InnoCom policy, which focused on the number of patents. However, our paper deviates from the existing literature, saying that considering the trade of the patents is quite important to understand the welfare effect. Okay, the outline data, empirical findings, and
What can I add a point on your last? Yes, I'm just wondering about the similarity of those, internet company. You have a lot of like Google buying up a lot of small company who create new online kind of service or network thing, right? So this is very similar. So I would just feels like unless we can show the trade is creating certain kind of inefficiency, otherwise we probably harder to arguing that because of the trade and the SOE are getting more subsidiary is not necessarily inefficient.
In our empirical setting, we are trying to convince you that basically we say we show two evidences. First off is that with and without this policy, you can see that the trade pattern of the patents and who sells with whom is going to significantly change. On top of that, we show that the renewal rate of the patents that are sold to firms who can be subsidized this renewal rate significantly declines after the InnoCom policy is initiated.
But this doesn't necessarily can invalidate the story of each of the company are just specialized in what they are good at. Some are good at innovate, some are good at getting the tax benefits. So I guess I'm asking this is, related to Daniel's paper and also some of the finding I find when I'm working on is this tax subsidy seems to really contributing to the investment change, and also looks like as if an improvement in the productivity, but very short-lived. So then it becomes unclear whether it's the tax benefits subsidiary creating the inefficiency or it's the trade, because I think the trade could be argued as firms specializing in what they are good at.
Correct. That's right. Yeah. So basically, because we have a model, that model is going to allow different types of firms to choose what they're good at.
Okay.
Okay, data. We basically combine three data sets. Patent assignment data, so we can track the ownership of the patents, who traded with and secondly is the software ownership data. However, this software ownership data, unluckily, we cannot track the trade. We only know that every firm, every year, what kind of software we hold. The third data we have is the Chinese tax data. We focus on firms within these 8 industries targeted by the InnoCom policies. And in the end, we can have the IPR portfolios at the firm year level. The patents data is better, so we can track whether the patent is renewed or not, and if the patent is traded, the buyer and the seller. Okay, this is going to give you a sense of the coverage of the InnoCom program the program starts from 2008 and our sample ended at 2011. The first column is going to be the number of new firms, how many firms can newly subsidize. So you can see that this program, the coverage becomes wider and wider, more and more firms involved. The second column is going to tell you the pass rate of this program, how selective it is. This 52% means that within those firms who are qualified to apply for this program, at the end, how many firms can be subsidized? So that means pass rate is 52%, and for another half fails. And you can see that gradually year change, this program becomes less and less selective. The third column is going to give you the sense about how many firms within this 8 InnoCom industries can be subsidized. So 20%, that means in 2008, around 20% of firms within these industries are subsidized. And you can see that basically it increases gradually over years. The last column is going to give you a sense about the intensive margin of the subsidy per firm year. For instance, it tells you that for every firm who gets subsidized in 2009, on average, you can get about 0.57 million RMB in that year. Okay, the second table wants to show you some kind of the change of the number of IPRs before and after 2008. So we separate the firms into qualified firms who can apply, and the firms who are now competing firms who cannot apply. And you can see that overall, before and after 2008, the number of the IPRs significantly increases, especially for these non-competing firms, nearly double. The third and the fourth column give you the renew rate change before and after 2008. Overall, for all these kind of the patents held by different firms, the renew rate after 2008 starts to decline. The last row is going to show the increase of the trade per firm. As you can see, before 2008, the trade of the patent is very rare. However, after 2008, the trade increased sharply.
Clarification, may I, please?
Please.
How is the renewal rate calculated, and what are the hurdles? And what are the hurdles in renewing a patent in China?
Okay, great, thank you. 3 years after granted, that is what we define the renew rate. The hurdle depends on types of patents in China. On average, it's about 1,000 RMB per year. You need to register every year. You need to pay that fee every year, 1,000 RMB.
Importantly, there's no more review. It's the entire firm's decision. If firm think it's worthwhile to renew, it will do so. If it does not, it will not do so. So that's the basis for the judgment. So we're going to use this as a way to gauge firm's own assessment how worthwhile this patent is.
So is this low? This review, the cost to renew is so low. It's only $1,000.
Yeah, we're going to report many firms choose not to do that.
Yeah.
Once they qualify for InnoCom subsidy, they stop renewing the patent.
Is this a statement about the quality of the patent or the quality of China's patent right protection?
What do you mean by?
I mean, I may have my patent, but everyone not respecting my patent, then what's the point? It's not worth my while even to file this 1,000. I assume that filing this $1,000 is just sending in the money and also sending in a statement.
A statement about quality. There are a lot of IPR disputes. Firms, firm win IPR cases.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good point. We can add a footnote documenting IPR, is enforced. if there's a dispute, IPR is enforced.
I think like if it's very important, then maybe you will write very extensively about the quality or about what the patent is about, and you file it. And then if this statement is effective in protecting your patent right, then you would do so. Otherwise, I mean, the $1,000 is unimportant, but what really this renewal means from the firm's perspective and from the market's perspective is very useful at this juncture.
Thank you. Good point. Okay. The first empirical finding I want to show you is firms change their number of IPRs. So in this regression, you can imagine I is going to be a qualified firm, T is the year. So the left-hand side, NIT, is the number of new obtained IPRs in year T. While the D is going to be a dummy. D is going to measure the distance, whether you are below 6 or not. Remember that the letter grade will not be increased after you have 6 IPRs. We also control for the firm fixed effect. So you can imagine what we are trying to argue is that for the same firm, we compare before and after 2008, the exchange of the number of the new patents, whether this effect is more pronounced for firms with less than 6 IPRs. That is what alpha 0 is going to be measured. And basically we find that yes, in the first column we find that the effect is significant and pronounced. In the second column, we look at only the self-developed IPRs. So you can find that the coefficient is slightly be higher, may suggest the firms first do some kind of in-home innovations, and then they choose to acquire some patents outside. In the third column, we control more aggressively. We try to control for the year fixed effect. So all these kind of the unobserved time dummy is going to disappear, and that we still find some kind of the significant result. In the last column, we do some kind of password test, some pre-trained test. We assume that we allow this kind of year, break year to be 2007, and we find that no significant correlation, between this kind of the IPR higher than 6 versus IPR less than 6 firms. The second regression what we want to show is that the patent quality starts to decline. This regression is doing at the firm patent year level. I is a firm, K is a patent, T is a year. So the left-hand side V is equals to 1 if the patent is renewed and 0 otherwise. Obtain year is going to denote that when this firm I gets this patent K. This obtain, if the patent is self-developed, it's going to be the granted year. If the patent is purchased outside, then obtain year is defined as the transaction year. We also control some observed patent characteristics here, such as the patent age, the patent industry classification, as well as the patent type mentioned in 30 versus 55. We control for firm year fixed effect. So roughly this regression is just comparing that for the same firm, if you some patents, some two similar patents, one patent is obtained before 2008, and the other patent is obtained after 2008. Then what is going to be the renewal rate difference? And this beta 0 is going to tell you that whether this renewal rate difference is more pronounced for those firms whose IPR is less than 6. And we find a significant relation that if for those patents whose renewal rate who are obtained after 2008, the renewal rate is significantly lower. Especially this effect is more pronounced for those firms whose IPR is less than 6. That is the first column, first row tells you. In the second column, we control for the obtained year fixed effect. So all the transaction years are going to be controlled, and this kind of time dummy is going to disappear. We find even more pronounced effect seems suggested that this kind of the renewal rate and the InnoCom policy has some causal effect. We also show lots of the other robustness, use the citations as the measure of the quality. We find a similar result. The InnoCom policy seems to result in low quality.
Yeah, Jianhuan, I was going to ask you, like, I thought like number of citations is probably the most intuitive proxy for quality. And when I think about renewal, I mean, it doesn't strike me as like the most important baseline measure or proxy for quality, right? I mean, there are other reasons for why a firm decided to renew a patent or not. You know, maybe some patents are getting old or they are about to expire, then, you know, the incentive to renew is declining.
So we actually tried the citations, similar results. This is here. Similar regression setup, just to change the Y the citations. The result are quite similar. One patent citation becomes less.
Okay.
So it may work for both of patent citation and renewal rate. I actually would advocate that the renewal rate has additional information that patent citation might not, because renewal rate, I mean, the reason you give are idiosyncratic reasons that should apply to any year and any firm type, right? So the renewal rate is trying to get potential inside information a firm has, firm's own judgment about how important a particular patent is. That potentially, you know, it may not be necessarily captured by subsequent citation information, because citation information tells us how important the patent is to the frontier of the knowledge, whereas firm's renewal rate tells us about how the firm itself think about how important this thing is. By comparing, you know, before, after, and across firm types, you can filter out other kind of idiosyncratic determinants of a renewal decisions.
I see. Good point. Thanks.
Okay. The third finding I want to show you is the trade pattern. So in this regression, we are doing regression at the trade pair. So we have some kind of I is going to the seller, is one firm who sells the patents. A is going to the buyer, N is going to the buyer. So this trade IN means that the number of patents flow from I to firm N in year T. And we classify the trade into a 2x2 matrix based on the sellers and the buyers' number of IPRs. For instance, you can see that this X is going to tell you that the seller is going to be a firm who has a loss of IPR greater than 6. And the buyer is going to be a firm whose IPR is less than 6. So he needs some IPRs to be subsidized. And then we look at this before and after the 2008, which type of the trade is going to increase more sharply. We expect to see that this kind of the greater than 6 firms sell to IPR less than 6 firms are going to be the most pronounced effect. And the result confirm our conjecture. So you can see that before and after 2008, the change comes from IPR less than 6 flow to IPR more than 6. The change is very small. However, if you look at the left-hand side of the figure, this is going to the biggest change of the trade of patents flow from IPR greater than 6 firms to IPR less than 6 firms. So roughly what we want to show is that the InnoCom policy seems to distort the patents trade pattern. On top of that, we want to show some spillover effects to those firms who cannot participate to the InnoCom program. Here, this Y is...
So, Jianhuan, so probably I'm just repeating a question raised by Meijun earlier. So I'm thinking about an extreme case. So why you say this is distortions? So suppose some patents are basically useless, and then the government's point is just to implement some industrial policy, like what Xiaobo modeled yesterday. So these 8 industries need to be supported anyway. So the point is just to give money to whatever firms in those industries.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty difficult for me to figure out what are the distortions there, what are the welfare losses there. So just think about these patents are basically useless, and now they previously those owners were holding those useless patents, so they don't have any market value, but now they are sold to those firms that want to get the subsidy. And to me, it's like improvement. So
okay. Yeah, so the distortion, what I mean is that a patent, so because of the subsidy, right? Then if I'm a firm who can use this patent efficiently, but I'm not qualified to get any subsidy, there's another firm who can use these patents in an efficient way, who cannot use this patent in an efficient way, but he is qualified to get subsidy. Then I want to sell my patent to him because we want to get some kind of be subsidized. This is what we mean by misallocation. And that
key is producing useless patent costs resources. That's the key.
Those are just sunk costs. So those useless patents have been produced.
No.
Right?
No. So Jianhuan is showing additional useless patent being produced because of InnoCom program. InnoCom program inspires many more useless patents to be produced. It's not just produced by those firms directly competing for subsidy, but also by firms that are not competing for subsidy because they have a chance to sell them to those firms that do compete.
So that part I don't quite. So you see that in the data, but maybe theoretically, as long as we have a stock of useless patents, then this thing can work, right?
Not enough.
Unless
apparently it's not enough. So yeah, that's part of the estimation to show. So the program has inspired. First of all, in the data you see a huge increase in patent. That's something that many people talk about. How many more patents China has? China has overtaken United States to be the #1 patent producing country in the world. Part of the drivers are something like InnoCom program. So Jianhuan is going to show that the structural estimation suggests many of the additional patents are low quality ones. They cost resources to produce, but citation data and firm renewal behavior suggest they are not very useful.
Okay,
so it's not just reshuffling the existing low quality patent, but many more additional low quality patent have been inspired by those pro innovation subsidies.
I mean,
Shang-Jin, I have a related question. Sorry, Bernie, go first.
I follow on Michael's point. I mean, the subsidy basically raised the value of the the useless patents. Tired meaning that it has run out its cost of usefulness. So that value has gone up. And Shang-Jin's point is that this caused a distortion in R&D effort, even useless. But how can we be sure that having useless patent is not contributing to some very useful patent? I mean, as we do research and so on and so forth, we realize that sometimes there are bad papers, but many bad papers can lead to one good paper because it's really a trying game. The more you try, the more likely you get a hit.
It's just collectively,
I mean,
yeah. So I think in our model framework, we have an extension to allow that to happen. So maybe I think you can see.
No, the point I'm trying to make is that showing some patents are not renewed does not necessarily mean you show inefficiency in R&D effort. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm right, or I'm just raising this as a question.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So,
so that's what the structural estimation is going to do. Structural estimation, because so Jianhuan is going to lay out the cost function and others going to estimate the cost of producing. First of all, estimate the quality distribution of the pattern, and then estimate the cost it takes to produce them.
Shang-Jin, can I follow up on this? I just have two things kind of keep pausing in my mind. One is similar to Bernie's point. Are you able to see actually more R&D invested in producing those patterns, or the increased number of the patterns simply come from more application on given amount of investment? That's one point. The other point is keep bothering me is, why the trade goes from the private firm to the SOE if the points are purely based on innovation, and if you showing that the private seems like you have this assumption of the private firm seems to be more innovative than the SOEs, and they trade in the wrong direction. But how, why isn't the opposite way? If so there must be something else affecting how they get those points or get those subsidy.
You don't have to respond to Mei-Jun's question, because you only have 10 minutes left, 8 minutes left. We haven't yet seen the model. So Xiaobo, you may just ask a question now.
I'll ask
let's
later.
postpone. Yeah. Okay, good. Jianhuan, you have 10 minutes without any interruption.
Let me show you the model, then lots of the concerns are going to be gone now. So roughly, the model is going to have two types of agents. Some firm is going to, is qualified to be subsidized. Some firms are not qualified to subsidize. Each firm on top can hold, maximum can hold one patent. There is one unit of homogeneous non-competing firms. They can generate patents, but no matter what, they cannot get subsidy. Their productivity is normalized to 1. There are M units of subsidy competing firms. They are heterogeneous in terms of productivity, and we just assume a very simple distribution of their productivity, binomial. Some firms are productive than 1, and some firms' productivity is lower than 1. If they have one patent, in the end, they can be they be some probability they can be subsidized. The quality of the patent is X, and the X is drawn from distribution. The mean of this distribution is going to be endogenized. The firm needs to choose the quality of the patents. There are 3 stages of this model. First of all, home innovation. Second, patents trade. Third, the government is going to subsidize with some probability to subsidize, the firms who have patents, and then firms decide whether to renew patents or not, and in the end, firms produce. So let's do some backward induction to introduce the model. In the last stage, production stage, with probability rho, the government the firm is going to get a subsidy, and the subsidies, the size of the subsidy is denoted by TZ, which depends on the productivity of the firm. A shock of the patent, ipsilon is realized. The firm then decides whether to renew the patent or not at the cost of C. So you can see that if the firm decides to produce with a patent, the profit is going to be productivity times the quality of the patent. X is chosen by the firm, and epsilon is the random noise. If the firm does not renew the patent, then the production is 0. So the expected value of this subsidy competing firms is a patent is going to be this is going to be the option value if I choose renew or not renew the patent, plus the probability that it can get subsidy times the subsidy, and the value of non-competing firms who has a patent, because he does not have any chance to get a subsidy, then it's quite easy, and his productivity is normalized to be 1. In the second stage, trade happens. It's going to be a very competitive trade. We assume there's no trade cost. So all the non-competing firms can enter the trade market. They are going to sell their patents. And those subsidy competing firms without patents is going to enter the market as a buyer with probability Q. Why we allow this Q? This is rationalized because in the data there are some firms who do not have 6 IPRs. We don't understand why, but they don't have 6 IPRs. So in our model is that it's just a random shock. We may not be able to get some patent. And the net surplus of the trade is going to be the buyer minus seller. So basically the trade is going to happen when this surplus is going to be greater than 0. You can see that if my productivity Z is less than 1, it's an inefficient trade. The patent is going to flow from a productive seller to an unproductive buyer. Without the subsidy, this kind of trade we are not having. This inefficient trade we are having. But with subsidy, then this inefficient trade may happen. This is what we call the misallocation of the resulted from the trade. And if my Z is greater than 1, so this is the efficient trade, then these firms will always buy some kind of good quality of the patent to produce. Okay, the first stage.
Jianhuan, for the trading thing, since you were emphasizing this inefficient trade, if there are competition among buyers, shouldn't you have something like another max over the Z's, right? I mean, if the buyers differ in Z, the most efficient buyer will get the patent, right, from the seller, not.
Yeah, agree. Yes. So right now I just assume that it must come from non-competing firms to competing firms. I do not allow that trade to simplify the model.
Okay.
So then in the first stage, home innovation stage, firms need to trade off between the quality of the patent and the succeed rate of the patent. If the high quality patents is more likely to fail, and low quality firms is going to be easy to be achieved. Here we allow the innovation cost to be different between the non-competing firms and the subsidy competing firms to track the possibility that different firms are good at different stuff. Some firms are good at innovating high quality patents, and some firms are good at generating low quality patents. So this is going to the equilibrium of the trade market. So you can see that if this line is going to the quality of the patents, this high quality patents is going to sell to efficient firms, and this low quality patents is going to be sell to the inefficient firms. And this kind of trade, the price of the patents is going to equalize the market, clean the market. Okay, great. So the welfare. The welfare roughly is going to be defined as the firm value minus the subsidy, and roughly, as I said, there are 3 channels. First is going to be participating firm generate low quality patents. There's some relocation, patents sold to inefficient firms, and spillover effect. Non-participating firm generate low quality patents to sell. There are 2 possible welfare effects that are out of the model. One is going to be the external knowledge spillover of more patents. This is going to try to somehow capture the idea of the last point. Even bad quality patents may have some good stuff. We call that knowledge spillover, and we are going to just impose some kind of exogenous parameter in the model to capture that. On top of that, there's some kind of opportunity shadow price of the government budget. When the government subsidizes these firms, they may provide less public goods. We also impose some exogenous assumption here to rationalize that. Okay, calibration, I don't think we have time to talk about that. Overall, let me give you some kind of the benchmark result. This stuff is going to tell you no knowledge spillover, no opportunity cost of the fiscal budget. What happens in terms of the welfare? Roughly, we find that the total welfare declines. about 0.7 billion. And specifically, when we decompose this welfare into 3 channels, we find that the spillover effect is the biggest. Roughly, this welfare loss is mainly driven by those firms who are not qualified to participate in this subsidy program, but because they expect they can sell the patents, they waste the resources to generate low quality patents. That is the biggest, that is the most important welfare channel in our model. Finally, we allow the knowledge spillover and the fiscal budget cost. The knowledge spillover is going to be internalized by, we define some kind of total knowledge capital. It's a weighted average of the number of patents. So this lambda is the quality of the patents, theta is the number of patents. We just aggregate them together. Total counts of the quality adjusted counts of the patents, and that is going to have some kind of the knowledge spillover on the productivity. You can imagine H is going to be spillover. Second, we assume that there is some kind of shadow.
Can you wrap up in 1 or 2 minutes?
Okay. Finally, we find that if the H is going to, if the knowledge spillover is around, our benchmark is tau equal to 0.2, the share price of the physical cost is 0.2, and we can find that this policy is welfare neutral if the knowledge spillover is around 80%. However, if the knowledge spillover, overall the knowledge spillover estimation is within this range, 0 to 0.2. So overall, we find that maybe this policy could still generate positive welfare, but the magnitude may not be so big. Okay, that is our conclusion. So 3 points we find. First is the subsidy policies that only counts the IPRs may generate welfare loss when the knowledge spillover is small. Second, we want to highlight the trade of the patents is very important. It's very, very important. Finally, we find that if, actually we don't have time to show that, but we do a counterfactual. That is, when I try to decide whether to subsidize you or not, I do not count your purchased IPR, but just count your self-developed IPRs. Then the intercom policies could be more efficient. That is roughly what we would do. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jianhuan. Let me formally end this session, and thank every speaker and participant for your participation. And we had a wonderful session. But for those of you who want to continue grill Jianhuan, do please feel to stay. Xiaobo, would you like to start your question first, and then Jianhuan may want to respond to Xiaobo and Meijun's question.
Sure. I have two comments. One is, I guess, in your setup, what will be the optimal subsidy policy? I mean, for example, you look at paper by A.C. Margaro, Wolf of the S.H. et al. So the subsidies usually is also leads to misallocation even in the U.S. So what will be I think it would be interesting to think about what type of policies that will encourage the more efficient allocation of resources. I think the literature for the U.S. says that you want to encourage more new entrants, new innovators, and away from the incumbent. So that's so maybe 6 is too high. Maybe you want to have a smaller numbers and encouraging that the more entrant of new firms, new innovators. And the second comment is that even in a way the market is also market is very noisy, and it could also be misallocated, provide wrong incentive that leads to misallocation. That for example, like Huawei or Alibaba or Tencent, they try to kill off the potential competitors by buying up the innovations, and knowing that they have that incentive. So then the firms will come up with IPRs, and so the distortion in the market even without the government policy. So that distortion is not necessarily all coming from government.
Can I ask a question? Mei Jing, you want to go first?
Jianhuan, do you want to respond to
Oh, yeah,
Xiaobo?
Okay. So optimal subsidy, yeah, we haven't also thought about yet. We can do that. Other frictions on the IPR trade market that can other distortions. I haven't thought about that after this, because what I want to do here is that I want to, in a sense, any other frictions, right? Just so the trade market is the most efficient one, and then we put some kind of subsidy tax distortions here.
So for example, a couple of job market papers this year, they're looking at the declining of dynamism in the US, right? Mm-hmm. So and it's related to the fact that the innovations tends to be more concentrated into big firms. Big firms have larger market powers, and because they're very profitable, so they actually also, the market rewards them. And mm-hmm. even though they have low quality innovations in terms of citations in the future, but they're still rewarded by the stock market because they have the market power.
Overall, we can introduce some kind of trade frictions depending on firm types. That could be done, but I just don't know how to get the parameters on these trade frictions, firm-specific trade frictions. That I have no idea. Right?
In terms of optimal policy, like if there's a way for subsidy to be linked to quality of the IPR, there will be an improvement, right? And there are things that at least exposed one can tell. So for example, maybe subsidy should not be given in the year in which IPR is produced and presented. Mm-hmm. It can be given, a few years later based on relatively objective measure of quality. So there will be an improvement in the current context. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I thought some of the the low quality patent may, you were thinking about these firms are deliberately wasting resources producing low quality IPR because they can now potentially sell it to these competing firms so that they can get subsidy. But I think it's some of these low quality IPR they show up in the patent data because now they actually it's worthwhile for them to pay. There is a patent application fee too, so it's not free. In the before they can sell it, it's already produced. Okay, the kind of low quality idea is already there. They already put resources in producing them because many research R&D have some uncertainty. Sometimes you get a good idea, sometimes you get a bad idea, and before this thing, the bad idea just no patent is filed, but now they file it, right? So because there is a trade market, so some of the low quality IPR may not be a pure additional waste of resource. It's just they show up now in the data because there is some benefit of paying the registration, paying the application fee, and get a patent to sell it. So that may be one a wrinkle to the waste story, that the magnitude of waste you have you have in the quantification exercise.
Yeah, I can add that some stock of the existing low quality IPRs.
I guess the application of a low quality IP, paying the application fee to get a patent for low quality IPR is responsive or is responding to the policy too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Thank you. This is
Mei Jing, do you have anything else to add?
I think I just had two early points. The second point, I think having just elaborated in much more details. And the first point, it's still just coming back to, I think Shang-Jin mentioned a bit already. It's about how the subsidy policy is tied to, who is qualified. So there's always something at my back of my mind of thinking, why this direction of the trade is determined in the way, it's not going to the more productive ones. So I think it's really not just about, not just about the subsidy policy, but rather than how a lot of determinants on who gets the subsidy might be correlated with some kind of inefficiency in place.
I think roughly what we want to highlight is that the fundamental misallocation comes from governments do not know the quality of patents. That's it. So
I think it's beyond the quality of patent. I mean, one question is, why don't the private firm buy from the SOEs? Right. So I think there's something else. In your model, you make it as exogenous. They are firms who are qualified. They are firms, no matter what they do, they are not qualified. I think that exogenous is the problem with subsidy policy.
That's what they're talking about. Yeah, that could be. Okay, thank you.
So, can I go back to your point about the, there may be some bad ideas just previously not patented, but now get patented, but it does not cost additional resources. So I want to push back a little bit and see what you think. So I want to make the argument that even without INNOCOM, there's already incentive for people to patent stuff that can be patented. So therefore, therefore I want to push this very little unpatented but patentable low quality ideas, because people need to get their their titles, for their professorial promotion or Yuanshi member of academy promotion and so on. So therefore, things that can be patented. So therefore, I think it's probably plausible to assume that even before INNOCOM program, things that can be patented have already been patented. And therefore, the INNOCOM actually produce a net increase in low quality patent.
Right. So for the, I agree there are incentives to patent something that's not very valuable commercially, but for some other reasons that may be. But this incentive may be stronger in SOEs than say in private firms. Private firms, they have to, they do R&D, something that they judge to be not very valuable, but they have to pay the application cost a year or 2 years for the application process. They may have less of those vanity reasons to patent these. But so that's one thing that I thought will be useful to look at, whether even for your measure of renewal as a self-perceived value of the patent, which is actually standard. The Peking has written a classical paper on the using patent renewal as a measure of the patent quality. But that in China context may also, the informatives of patent renewal as a measure of quality, a self-perceived patent quality may differ by private versus SOE firms. I don't know if you can look into that, whether there's any difference by firm type. But I agree with you there. For SOE firms, they might be just patenting anything that can be patented for other reasons.
But private firms wouldn't CEOs and so on still like to boast about how many patents they have. So there's some, especially if you think, as you said, if the application cost is relatively trivial to the firm, so therefore the pool of patentable but unpatented low quality idea probably is not very high, because even for private firms, probably they would have some incentive to do that anyway. Like if you go to any Chinese company,
but on the margin,
there was a room that display patent awards, visits from by members of the government, right? So like very trivial stuff they will display. But I think we can look into the firm ownership of the firm, which we haven't done very much yet. So see whether Jianhuan, right, we can document like incremental patterns, trace them by firm by ownership. Yeah.
Right. Shang-Jin, can I ask another kind of conceptual question? What is the reason for, in your model, is there a market failure that will rationalize government intervention in the IND? Was there a spillover effect, or just a patent not?
That's the thing. Jianhuan flew through very, very quickly because Michael said you're running out of time. So the externalities, it's assumed externalities whose size depends on assumed parameters. So he was playing around with various parameters from the data. Yes.
And what about instead of subsidizing, patent, what about just improve? Do you hear the assumption is the patent enforcement is perfect, right? So I thought I guess in this period of time, Chinese government also stepped up a lot of patent enforcement. The patent courts special patent courts were established. And if you look at the number of patent lawsuits, right, it has increased a lot. And the enforcement is known to have improved dramatically, even by foreign observers.
That's true.
People used to criticize China for not enforcing IPR, and a lot of international scholars say, no, it's no longer true in China.
That was my answer to Bernard's early question. Indeed, there are lots of patent-related disputes, and firms often win. I mean,
so
patent holders often win.
That could also contribute some of the explosion of patents, including
that can. Yeah, that can, but that won't matter for the regression results that Jianhuan shows. What Jianhuan played around was that it's a kink, right? So in the scoring method designed by bureaucrats for income subsidy, like achieving the number 6 is very important. So it shows that for firms whose initial IPR is a different level, you can have initially already have 6 or 4 or 5 or 3 or 2 or 1, the increment in IPR is very different. So that suggests that the increment is, in particular, like a firm that used to have only 5 IPRs, have much more higher chance to see a bump in their IPRs. That suggests not just, whereas the additional IPR induced by better enforcement should be like a uniform effect or innovative.
Right, no, I agree. That's the kink is informative. I have trouble understanding the figure that Bernard asked twice about as well. I thought, as you are approaching 5, so the share of invention was decreasing as you approach.
So that graph is a bit distracting, Jianhuan. Since
I actually don't.
Subsequent study we didn't really look at the invention, but so the way I understand, Jianhuan, you can correct me, right? So we actually have a bunch of graphs from different dimensions trying to show that firms that apply for income subsidy actually in their portfolio of IPRs, there's a decline in average quality. So that's the thing we want to show, and there are different ways to show it. This is one of the many ways to show this. In particular, to the extent invention, under the assumption that invention pattern has more genuine innovation content, this graph shows that there's a firms that just barely qualify for income subsidy have a especially low share of IPR that's invention.
Yes, but in some sense, like at least a very high level when you have just one patent, while at the same time qualifying for income subsidy, right? Is by design. I mean, it seems like just because one invention gives you 30 points.
Yeah.
Right.
One invention is equal to 6 other non-invention IPRs. Yes.
Right. So that's like by design. If you are among those firms who got an income subsidy, if you only have one IPR count, that IPR count is much more likely to be an invention patent, right? That was because otherwise you don't get that 30 points.
Yeah, but that's true also for those whose IPR is greater than 6.
Yes.
If you have greater than 6, none of them need to be invention. They just need to be a patent, your utility patent. If you have more than 6, all the 6 IPRs could be utility patent or design.
No, but your explanation will give the opposite picture. You will say for firm that just qualify, then you should see 100% of the. So for the firm that actually qualify for subsidy using just then one invention patent, then 100% of the IPR will be invention. So so in fact, the invention patent share of IPR should be higher for firm around 6. Your statements, right?
If you have 6, none of them need to be invention.
Yeah, but then 100% of them will be. In other words, 100% of IPR will be invention in your example. Right. So the picture is about.
I don't get it. I think Hamid's right.
Be 0? Shouldn't it be 0? If you have 6 IPRs, of course among the 6, one could be invention, but in principle, none of the 6 IPRs need to be invention.
In order for
me to get 30 points.
So this graph is not very informative, not very useful, because it's also it's not a particular metric used in subsequent regression or model Jianhuan. So you have other graph and regression that shows something unusual, special about firm that trying to qualify for the subsidy. It's probably you're right. Timing, this is a distraction basically. This graph.
Usually citation. Citation is better.
Is it a good time I jump in for a suggestion? Yeah, I was thinking some tests could be informative. For example, how about we try to find the linkage or the magnitude of the linkage between the subsidy and the patents that are renewed or they have high citation, and especially how that magnitude might differ across firms that involve a lot of buying low quality patent or not.
Sorry, say one more time. Suppose I want to do a graph. What do you want to have on the vertical axis? What do you want to have on the horizontal axis?
I was thinking of the regression of Y is a subsidy, and X is capture some variables that only capture that firm's patents that are renewed and have high citation. Oh yeah, in a way, so Y and X, yes, in your graph. And also I think this could be done intact with how much the firm has been engaged in buying the other patent from other firms. Right, so if they say, for example, the first coefficient comes out quite high and positive, doesn't matter what's the magnitude, it's actually give us a sense of, it's informative in the way we understand if the firm have, say, this level of renewable patent or this level of high citation patent or patent citation, it's receives this amount of subsidy or this likelihood of receiving subsidy. And if the second coefficient comes out, say, it could be positive or negative. I think the first one should come out positive. The second one could be positive or negative. And then if the second one comes out negative, it will be very strongly supporting your story of, without engaging in the trading, the amount of subsidy goes to those high quality pattern are lowered down.
So subsidy, Meiji, just to clarify, so-called subsidy takes the form of a reduction in corporate income tax. Essentially, cut your income tax by half. That's the subsidy.
Are you able to measure it in amount or the just?
Well, I mean, the amount will be proportional to the tax obligation, but the subsidy is a reduction in tax.
Yeah, you can probably develop, loose scaled so that it adjusts to the firm's tax liability. I think of the suggestion is trying to, I just wanted to understand of, how much subsidy really goes to the high citation patent, and whether this relation, this link, be effective.
So the table that Jianhuan is showing right now on the screen shows there's no relationship. It says basically between citation and subsidy, because subsidy is the same for all firm that become INNOCOM member firms.
Yeah, but this table shows the points and the quality.
Yeah, so firms that receive once they receive the relevant IPR, once they receive the 60 points, for example, the two firms that have 60 points could have very different subsequent citation count, but that makes no difference for how much subsidy they get. They will get the same subsidies.
So what you're saying, I guess our difference is saying the points should be a direct proxy
Yes,
of the subsidies. Okay, and I got that. And then the only thing is maybe you can do a interaction term in this one. The quality of proxy and interact with, later on you have this, say, the sudden increase of the number of the patent, basic indicator of the trade.
You have the
I'm not following.
I was thinking the interaction would give an implication or understanding of how the trade impact this relation between points and quality.
Things, it's pretty late. I think I have to intervene. Maybe could you please, talk to one of them later, or email them the question.
Send us email.
Let me just stop this. And once again, thank you for staying.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all.
Bye.